In the last video, a number of modifications were added to the Voodoo Bizango Carbon. In this video, we'll have one more major modification and then take the bike out for a ride. So stay tuned as I'll try and answer the question of whether this bike is worth upgrading. In my Canic Chase video, I mentioned that this bike would really benefit from a higher end front fork. I was actually planning on switching the fork at the end of the mountain bike season when prices tend to be lower. However, last week I saw an absolutely killer deal on a fork that exactly matched what I was looking for. That fork was the Fox Rhythm 34 with a fit grip dampener, 120mm of travel and 34mm stanchions. On first impressions when comparing to the original RockShox Duty fork, the new fork is definitely thicker, wider but also lighter. Installing the fork was really easy, only taking around 20 minutes to cut the steerer to size, insert the star nut and install on the bike. So now we have all the modifications complete on the bike, it's time to take this thing out for a ride and see how it performs. So starting out with the front fork. I've got to say this has completely changed the characteristics and feel of the bike. One aspect to this that was immediately noticeable was when going over the smaller bumps and impacts. This is where the original forks really struggled, as it actually required a fair amount of force to start compressing the travel. This led to a very harsh and jarring ride, which was quite uncomfortable when out on the longer rides. However, with these new Fox forks, it really feels like the first 50mm of suspension travel is soaking up those smaller bumps. This leads to a much more comfortable and controlled ride when out on the trail. Contrasting to this, the fork also feels pretty stiff in the right areas. I can feel right away when sprinting out of the saddle that the fork doesn't pogo around like before. In addition, the extra stiffness from the 34mm stanchions help to maintain control in the corners. So in terms of weight, the old forks weighed in at around 2.4kg, while the Fox Rhythm forks weigh in around 1.95kg. This might not sound like much, but when picking the bike up it now feels far more balanced around the point that I hold the top tube. This makes it so much easier to pick the bike up and carry it over fences when you've only got one hand available. So getting this fork is slightly odd as it's only normally sold directly to the OEMs. This means some things such as the cable clamp, star nut and volume spacers aren't included with the fork. I've still got some tuning to do to the suspension settings, but for the price I am more than pleased with my purchase. Next up we've got the DTSwiss X1900 rear wheel. So I only replaced the rear wheel because the original wheel was beginning to have problems with its bearings. To be totally honest, the only differences I've really noticed with how the bike performs is a slight bit more acceleration and ease on the climbs, which is to be expected from a slightly lighter wheel. One thing that was immediately noticeable when changing over to this wheel was the fact that the free hub is really loud, which in some senses is good as walkers can hear you coming. However, it can get annoying when you're trying to chat with your mates when out on the ride. When I get round to replacing the front wheel, I'll do a proper breakdown of the pros and cons of upgrading the wheel set on this bike. So this bike comes stock with 2.25-inch tyres on the front wheel. While this is okay, the front fork and rim can accept much wider than that. For this reason, I've added a MAXXIS Ardent 2.4-inch tyre onto the front. This really does make a massive difference to how the bike corners. On the trails, the front tyre really feels like it carves into the dirt when compared to the 2.25-inch tyre. So the old 2.2-inch Ardent race tyre that was on the rear wheel was absolutely shredded to bits by the slate rocks that I usually ride on. Therefore, I swapped the old front tyre onto the rear. Unfortunately, the design of the Bizango frame pretty much limits you here to 2.25-inch tyres. In saying that, the 2.25-inch tyre on the rear wheel still feels like it has plenty of grip and you still have all the benefits of a lower rolling resistance. The final modification was to the grips, and while the stock Voodoo ones are pretty good, I was finding that after a couple of hours of trail riding my hands were going a bit numb. In addition, the old grips had these small knobbles on which were starting to come off and get worn down after only a couple of 100 miles of riding. Therefore, I replaced them with some really nice grips from Raceface. Now, changing your grips is one of the cheapest and easiest modifications that you can do to your mountain bike and can really aid in comfort whilst out on the trails. So all in all, I'm really happy with how these modifications have impacted the bike. I'm definitely going to take the bike to a trail centre soon so I can fully put these modifications to the test. And as I said, I've still got a bit of tuning still to do with the suspension settings, but after my ride today I'm really confident that the bike will perform excellently. I think it's quite easy to get carried away making modifications to your bike without actually enjoying the bike for what it is. And I think that the Voodoo Bizango Carbon in its stock form is absolutely excellent, but I do really appreciate the fact that it's been designed with upgrades in mind. With a tapered headset and boost space wheels, it really gives you a variety of different options of high-end components to choose from. My recommendations to anybody thinking about making modifications to your bike is really give some thought to exactly what you want out of changing the parts. So make sure to take time and care when searching for parts to make sure you're getting something that fits and that you're getting the best deal. I think it's really important, whatever bike you ride, that you just get out and ride it. And if modifying the bike will help you to do that more often, then it's worth every single penny. So if you found this video useful or enjoyable, you might also like the other videos that I have on this bike. I'll leave a link in the description to a playlist with all those videos in it, so do check that out if you are interested. Anyway, I'd just like to thank everybody who's been supporting the channel recently. I've been thoroughly blown away by the positive reaction that people have been having to these videos, so thank you very much for watching and ride safe.